We're talking Keto Diet Brain Hack, 3 myths exposed, and we're starting right now. I'm David Barr. If you're looking to get bigger, faster, stronger, get leaner, go longer, hit that subscribe and then the little bell so you don't miss the latest tips and tricks. And I'm doing this in collaboration with MikeTNelson.com. So special thanks to Dr. Mike T. Nelson, scientist, engineer, overall rock star, strong guy, Mike T. Nelson, the guy with the T in the middle. So there is a lot of information out about the Keto Diet Brain Hack, and really it is very, very low fidelity. My goal is to help advance the conversation, advance the field, so I want to explore 3 common myths associated with this. Again, really help advance that conversation because I love performance optimization, whether it's brain, whether it's just lifestyle, diet, whatever it is. And right now, the conversation with regard to keto diets, keto supplements, it's really retarded. It's being held back, literally, because there's just massive infidelity with regard to the information. We all love our echo chambers. It's human nature, but it's one of those things, if we really want to help promote these diets as potentially healthy lifestyle, maybe an alternative for athletes, we really have to have a higher fidelity conversation. Essentially, we have to stop the bullshit. We have to get real. So myth number 1, keto diets are great for your brain. Pretty simple, right? Pretty straightforward, hitting it hard, coming out of the box. And right now, the way you read about keto info, keto diets, you would think that they are just miraculous inventions. Like everybody benefits from them. There's nothing but great stuff. I mean, people are describing ketones, promoting ketones as rocket fuel for the brain, which is insane. I will get to that in a bit. But right now, this is just patently intellectually dishonest. And it doesn't mean that they can't help people, that the keto diet can't help people. There are people who benefit dramatically with these diets, but it is a minority of people. So we need to have a, like I said, a higher fidelity conversation about this. Get real. What does the real research show? And there are 2 things that help perpetuate this myth. One is that we rely really, really heavily on neuropathologies like epilepsy when referring to the keto literature. And man, this is overblown. This needs to stop. Okay, the fact that we have to lean so heavily on neuropathology research, that is very telling about the strength of the research in healthy people. Okay, that's a problem. And if you're getting triggered by this, it's probably because you're stuck in the echo chamber. I am not anti-keto. I am not trying to take a keto diet away from you. If you've had success with a keto diet, that's awesome. That's exciting. I love hearing the stories. I get excited by them. You know, it's very motivating. I think we all like those stories. So I'm not saying anything negative about that. It's the fact that we have to understand that referring to neuropathology and extrapolating to healthy people, that's not the way to do it. In fact, it's a bit like casting an arm after a break and saying, hey, look, the bone got healthier. The bone was stronger after it got casted, after it had a cast on it. So we should all just cast all of our limbs all the time and they will get stronger. Well, obviously that's absurd, right? So if you have a specific neuropathology that's going to benefit from a keto diet and you're extrapolating that to healthy people, that's a problem. Okay, we need to stop this. Now, full disclosure, I'm a little more sensitive to this with regard to epilepsy because I've been personally touched by it, but that's a whole separate issue. Right now, really, we just need to have a higher fidelity, intellectually honest conversation. And we could start by shifting our perspective to healthy individuals. Research on healthy individuals. The second thing that perpetuates this myth about keto diets as a brain hack is anecdotal evidence. And I don't know of another industry that relies on anecdotal evidence more than the supplement industry, but the keto claims are approaching that. So that's a problem. Now, again, if you've had success with these diets, if you've had clients, athletes who've had success, that's fantastic. I am not taking that away from you, okay? You should be proud of that. No one can take that away from you. The point is we need to have a higher fidelity, intellectually honest conversation and say, look, we can't rely on anecdote as objective evidence, okay? We know most people are going to be reporting in echo chambers, and the people who are typically reporting, especially long-term, are those that had the success with it. You are not hearing stories from all the people who fail years after they fail, right? If the diet didn't work for them, if the lifestyle overhaul didn't work for them, you're not hearing about those stories. You're typically only hearing the success stories, and the longer the success, the more likely we are to hear about it. So just keep that in mind with regard to the conversation. Again, if we're really trying to help promote these diets as a potential alternative, maybe something to help people, we really need to have that higher fidelity conversation. Myth number 2, keto diets are for everyone. Hopefully you're not buying into this one, because keto diets are not only just, they're not a diet, they're a lifestyle change. And a lot of people, that is fantastic. That is exactly what they need. For a lot of people, that is something that they love. It's very easy for them. That is not the majority of people. And we have to be honest about that. That's okay. It doesn't take away anything from anyone else who succeeded, including yourself. Again, this is just a higher fidelity conversation. Now, special thanks to Dr. Mike T. Nelson. He introduced me to research showing that even something like fat oxidation is incredibly idiosyncratic. It has great individual variability. Different people burn fats at different rates, and people respond to keto diets at different rates. We also have neurotransmitter information on keto diets. Different people respond in terms of different magnitudes with regard to the neurotransmitters that are produced. And this is particularly relevant when we're talking about Keto Diet Brain Hack. So again, important to understand this is a lifestyle overhaul. Maybe very easy for some people. That is not the majority of people. Maybe very effective in some people. That is not the majority of people. There is no problem. It doesn't take anything away from us to acknowledge these facts. Question of the day, how is the keto diet affecting your lifestyle? Is it affecting your health? Is it affecting your overall performance? Is it helping you with clients, athletes, that kind of thing? Let us know in the comments below. I'd really like to hear from you. Tip number 3 is coming up, and stay tuned because there's 2 key questions that we have to answer in order to figure out whether or not we're going to use keto supplements and keto diets to really hack the brain. So those are coming up. Stay tuned for those. Myth number 3 for Keto Diet Brain Hacks, the idea that ketones are the preferred fuel for the brain. Now, this one has just been blown out of proportion. It is basically a marketing technique. It's a way to put a positive spin on using ketones and make us feel good about trying the keto diet, whatever it is. The reality is you can think of ketones as junk fuel that the brain uses so it can save the real valuable stuff, that glucose, for when it's needed. And if that sounds harsh, if you're having an emotional reaction to that, then unfortunately you've been targeted by that marketing. So consider this. How does that affect the application? How does that change from preferred fuel to junk fuel change anything? It doesn't. That's the point. It doesn't change anything. So the idea, again, if you're triggered by this, you've been targeted by that marketing, unfortunately. But we see this with muscle, right? We know that the body uses fats first if it can. Once we get metabolically ramped up to using fats, it will use glycogen or glucose for those higher intensity needs, right? So it's using the never-ending fuel of fat, think of it as junk fuel, and then preserving the gold, preserving that really valuable high intensity fuel. And you have to think it's very ironic that some people are also invoking another marketing term referring to ketones as rocket fuel for the brain. Well, no, it's the exact opposite most likely, right? I mean, just as we see with muscle, the rocket fuel is the glucose. The junk fuel is the ketones. So again, this marketing spin to try to sex up keto diets and ketone supplements, it's got to stop if we are going to be perceived as scientifically legitimate. But rather than just putting out all this nonsense, this marketing hyperbole, I mean, it's approaching the level of the supplement industry. So again, have the higher fidelity conversation to really help promote the scientific fidelity of the diet. Consider that ethanol, or the alcohol that we ingest, is a preferred metabolite when we ingest it, right? It gets metabolized before anything else, before fat, before carbs, before other types of alcohol that are used as poisons, like antifreeze. I mean, ethanol is actually used medically to help treat antifreeze poisoning because it's metabolized first. So by that rationale, we should be using ethanol as our primary fuel source because it's the primary fuel. It's the preferred fuel, right? No, it's absurd. Right? And it's the same thing with ketones. We just don't need to have this marketing spin that it's preferred fuel. It's not a big deal. It doesn't change anything. It's just a way of looking at it, and that perspective seems to change whether or not people like the diets, people like using keto. It doesn't need to be that way. So the 2 key questions we have to ask about ketones and keto diets. Number 1, the neurosuppressive effects of ketones on the brain. Is it really direct result of ketones themselves, or is it caused by a decrease in glucose and maybe insulin? Or is it a combination of all of them? Because once we're able to figure that out very precisely and the effects of each, then we can start to figure out whether or not we're going to have benefits from applying ketones in certain situations, because it's not a one-size-fits-all type of intervention, right? Key question number 2 about the Keto Brain Hack is going to be whether or not the neurosuppressive effect is a net limitation or if it's going to be an overall limitation. So if we were talking, it's just not going to let the brain go above 100% activity, dip into that pathophysiological range, then that's awesome, right? That's exactly what we would want. But if it's a net suppression, say an overall net 20% suppression, then that's going to be a problem, because that means it's going to suppress those times of healthy, normal activity when we are trying to learn and we want to have higher brain activity. So again, it's that difference between not letting the brain dip into a pathological state versus an overall suppression effect. And that's very important. Right now, the literature doesn't seem to have a lot of information about that, although there are a couple studies showing a neurosuppressive effect in healthy individuals. Unfortunately, I don't like to go into rodent research unless we really have to. And unfortunately, when it comes to keto and neuro stuff, we typically have to rely on rodents because it's a lot harder to get a brain biopsy from a human. I've only had a couple myself, but it's really unpleasant. So not something you want to do. But in the one case, there was a pretty serious, about a 50% decrease in a learning response in rodents when keto diets were applied. So it's one of those things, we need to be careful of that and understand that we can have higher brain activity when we are learning, thinking long-term potentiation, that kind of thing, but it's not necessarily going to be pathophysiological. So there are times when, well, not everyone needs higher brain activity, but hopefully if you're watching this, you're having a higher brain activity. And my point isn't to specifically cherry pick the studies that have been negative, and we're not even talking about the keto adaptive period. I mean, let's get rid of that. We understand that's going to be problematic. But right now, what's presented in the literature is so overwhelmingly biased in terms of pro-keto stuff, again, largely pathophysiological neuropathologies. So it's good to actually acknowledge that, yeah, there are some studies that show this may not be the best thing in the world. This could actually affect athletes. It could affect, students, people who require that high cognitive function, do a lot of learning. So we need to be very careful and present a well-rounded approach. And I'm not trying to do a lit review here. I'm just saying there's more to it than what's typically being presented. Now, we do talk about the athlete impact of keto diets on performance in a book I co-authored with Anthony Almada. This is free. I'll link to it, and it is fully referenced. There is a ton of information. I really think this helps advance the conversation. And it's one of those things where, yeah, we actually worked for a carbohydrate company when we produced this book. That's not just acknowledged, that's discussed, I think, in depth. But I no longer work for that company, nor does my co-author Anthony Almada. And the beauty is we can still be proud of that work. We can still stand by that work because it's based on the objective literature. There's no bias now, even though there was one at the time, or there was a conflict of interest at the time. There is no conflict of interest now, and I still stand behind the book. The goal is to help advance the conversation, have a higher fidelity conversation. I think the book can do that. Videos like this can do that. So let me know what you think, and maybe we can work together on this. Help advance that conversation, help people out. I'll link to other videos in this series. You'll definitely want to check those out. But overall, for keto diet brain hacks, definitely not a rock solid solution for anybody. We haven't talked about the energy fluctuations. I mean, that's great if that helps you. But again, that's a specific subset. It's not specifically the ketones impacting your brain. And we need to make that distinction while also saying this is a hugely potentially beneficial impact for a lot of people. But if you're not having blood sugar swings, if you're not having fatigue all the time, it's maybe not something that's going to impact everybody. Again, we just need to be honest about that component. So if it's affecting you in a positive way, that is awesome. I'm psyched. Let me know. I want to hear about it. But otherwise, again, let's just help advance that conversation. Again, special thanks to Dr. Mike T. Nelson and MikeTNelson.com. Love the stuff there. Be sure to check it out. Thanks for watching. I'm David Barr. Until next time, raise the bar.